Thank you, everyone. I know what you're thinking. I'm already back. And this time, Zach and I are here to talk about why accessibility is important. And if you're a developer, you're probably looking at this screen and thinking, oh my God, there's important on the screen. And if you write CSS like me, you absolutely hate that word. But we're going to take a minute to think about why accessibility is important, and this is the one excuse you have for ever using that word in your code. So before we get started, I want to talk about why you should listen to us. Zach and I care deeply about accessibility, and I know a lot of people in this room do. As self-appointed Chief Date Picker Officer, Zach cares deeply about scheduling experiences for everybody, and I'll let you guess which component he's talking about based on that title. As for myself, as self-appointed Admiral of Accessibility Caring, I care deeply about accessibility, and I get to represent Angular in Google's continued research for advancing accessibility on the web as a whole. So collectively, we're dedicated to improving accessibility on the web and making sure Angular is participating in that. So that's who we are and what we're involved in, but now I'm going to talk about the why. Angular is dedicated to supporting you in building accessible applications for everyone. And our approach to that is by prioritizing first-party or built-in accessibility. So this talk is not going to be how to build accessibly in your apps as much as how the Angular team is thinking about building accessibility into the framework where possible so that you can go and also care about accessibility and still do all of the testing that you have to do, but know that maybe the things you're worrying about, we are worrying about different things, and hopefully you never have to even see the things that I'm going to talk about. So to start off, accessibility is really overwhelming. There's a word on the screen that you may not even recognize. That's how confusing it is. Ally is the A in accessibility, followed by 11 letters, and then the Y. But yeah, accessibility is super confusing. There's now multiple words I'm supposed to remember, and there's numbers in this word, and there are also L's, and that's super weird. And I frequently feel like I'm a hedgehog being given a bunch of bowling pins and just expected to know how to bowl, right? We all are trying to build accessible experiences, but even the Ally researchers don't always know or have answers to exactly what the most accessible experience is going to be. And it's really scary and difficult to feel like even with the best of intentions, even if you're an expert in the field, you don't always have the answers for what accessibility looks like in your specific use case. So we think of accessibility on the Angular team as putting up guardrails to keep you on the right path. So sure, if you're a bowler like me, you can still throw a bowling ball and end up in a different lane, or end up down your lane, or end up, I don't know, just not being good at bowling like me. But the building blocks and built-in solutions in Angular are designed to guide you forward and help you get to the end of your lane and at least knock over some of the pins. So I mentioned first-party solutions. We're now going to take a look at how different parts of Angular are adding those guardrails to the framework to help make Angular more accessible. First up, we're going to talk about the framework. So you can think of the framework as Angular's heart, or the primitives that allow you to build web experiences for your users. If you've seen me talk in the last year, you've probably heard me mention streamlined page title accessibility, and I know Sarah also talks about it in her Day 1 keynote. So best practice of the web is ensuring that each page title in your app communicates the unique content of that page. Here, I can see I have a bunch of Google search tabs open, but I can actually see what the Google search is without having to navigate into that tab. It's a way better UX, but it's also a more accessible solution. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that this gem of photos was on that last tab without having to navigate by a screen reader all the way to the tab, go into the tab, and then look at, hopefully, the alt text on all of these images. And Angular was one of the first frameworks to revolutionize and introduce single-page apps, and we're super proud of that impact. But single-page app client-side routing makes it less obvious that each of those unique page titles needs to be unique for each route. So version 13.2 streamlined this and actually introduced a new router title property to the Angular router. So you can now add a title directly to your route definition, and there's no additional imports, and it's strongly typed due to amazing community contributions. So a single line per route is now going to get you that more accessible solution. This is super great for new users and users just getting started with Angular, but we also provide ways to configure more complex title logic with providing a custom title strategy. You can learn more about this, and because I'm on Angular DevRel, of course, I'm going to plug our own stuff. But we have a Google I/O 2022 workshop all about building accessible apps with Angular. Another way the framework prioritizes adding guardrails for accessibility is with first-party localization support. So Angular is designed with high-performance localization for the world in mind. And we're unique in dedicating support for a performant first-party localization strategy. You can learn more about this by, again, heading to the Angular YouTube channel and checking out a great video by Mark on how to get started with localization in your apps. Finally, a final guardrail we add is with linting and extended diagnostics. So ESLint out of the box contains 10 ESLint rules specifically aimed at ensuring that your templates are more accessible. I highly recommend going back to my first plug of a code lab and copying and pasting all of these ESLint rules into your projects when you get home from ng-conf. That's a super easy way to make sure that your linting is going to check for really easy things like missing ARIA attributes or empty alt text on images. And these ESLint rules are super cool, and we love them so much on the team that we're actually super excited to announce that we'll be introducing new Ally extended diagnostics based on some of these ESLint rules. Yeah! Yeah. So it's pretty cool. So in an upcoming version, our team is hard at work building some of those ESLint rules directly into extended diagnostics. If you don't know what extended diagnostics are, they're super cool because they take linting one step further and actually provide an extendable framework for continuing improvements in developer productivity. So basically, directly within VS Code or your code editor, we're going to be able to warn you as you're writing your template about some of these really simple accessibility rules that we can lint and say, hey, like, you're missing that alt text on this image that's going to be ng optimized with that image directive, right? So your images just got way better out of the box. You didn't even compile. You didn't serve your application directly within writing your code. We're going to be able to point out some of these accessibility guardrails that we can do. So I keep mentioning what Angular is doing that we feel is unique and we're super proud of. But sometimes the best thing we can do is look to the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is, at least to me, everyone in this room and everyone in the world contributing to advancing the web as a whole. And sometimes the best way to push Angular's accessibility forward in a built-in way isn't to reinvent the wheel, but to ensure that we're participating in and incorporating the latest advancements to the web platform. One way to do that is to ensure that when possible, we're using native APIs. A great example of this that we all know is in Angular Material. So Angular Material doesn't reinvent the button, right? We don't say like, hey, we can go and create our own button and it's going to be so much better. It's just not going to be a good button. We know that using native button elements are a more accessible solution. They're built to capture a number of standard interaction patterns. They work across browsers, and they're really important to accessibility. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're going to look to the platform where they already have solutions provided for us. The same can be said not just about buttons, but about the web as a whole, right? We're always looking at new native APIs that are being introduced to standardize the web experience across platform, from web to your mobile solutions, to Safari, to Chrome, to all of the great places people are using your apps. A great new example of this is how we're currently adapting to the recent advancements in color and contrast on the web. You may recognize this mixin as the Angular CDK's high contrast mode. Windows has a super cool feature for accessibility called Windows High Contrast Mode that allows you to specifically look at a user agent's preferences, and if the user agent, or me on my browser, says, I want to see high contrast mode, maybe I have a condition with migraines and I want to see a higher contrast there, we can call it out and style the app specifically for those users. So the CDK accessibility package provides a Sass mixin for us to do just that. It allows you to define styles that apply only in high contrast mode for Windows. So to create those styles, you define this mixin, and then the mixin works under the hood by targeting a CSS class that's added to your CDKs by the CDK to the body of your app. And when high contrast mode is detected at runtime, we're going to apply these styles. And we do all of that detection via something called the high contrast mode detector service. And I'm going to say that a lot, and I'm going to get it right every time. So high contrast mode is only in Windows. And that's super great for Windows users, but on Chrome we have prefers color schemes, and browsers and mobile have light mode and dark mode and dawn mode and dusk mode and aurora mode, and I don't know. Frankly, there's too many modes. So the ecosystem is super fragmented, and another custom solution isn't always the best way to handle this. This is where forced colors comes in. So the ecosystem recognized the same fragmentation that Angular did, and similar to our accessibility mixin's high contrast mode detector service, a new forced color CSS media query detects if the user agent has some sort of forced color mode on. So it would be active when Windows high contrast mode was detected in Windows, but let's say Chrome decides to do Chrome high contrast mode, it would also be active for that. And it's now agnostic to the browser. It's just going to be one universal platform API. And you can see that this is currently being adopted cross-platform, and we don't even care about one of these, so good riddance, IE11. So yeah, super high adoption, which means we're super excited to use it. So the solution seems pretty simple, right? We have our high contrast mode detector service solving this previously unhandled problem that Angular got to solve and really make sure we were writing styles for this specific user group. But we now have a native API provided by the ecosystem that's going to target this same problem. So we should just rely on the native API, right? So already out in a version, if you've ng updated, you don't even know this, but under the hood, we have a guardrail in place where we're actually respecting user color preference under the hood using the forced color API in our high contrast mode detector service. So update to the latest patch, and you're already getting this out of the box. So the forced color is our high contrast mode detector service. But we can actually take this one step further, and somebody on stage with me right now actually has a draft PR up that will actually go one step further and remove high contrast mode detector service and replace it with forced color. So we're always keeping up to date with the latest in the ecosystem where accessibility is concerned. Yeah, very cool. So forced color is high contrast mode detector service. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we can rely on the native API, like forced color, to ensure that we're up to date with the latest of cross-platform advancements in color preference and accessibility. As you may have noticed, that PR was opened by somebody on stage with me. And this entire example of integrating the larger web ecosystem didn't come from the framework, but it came within a CDK mixin. So now I'm going to pass it over to Zach to talk about what components and the CDK are doing to prioritize accessibility. Take it away, Zach.
Yes, Zach. All right, thank you, Emma. I could use guardrails for pronouncing high contrast mode detector service. Say that 5 times fast. We're all web developers here, and we know that it's easy to build web applications with a UI component library. Angular offers a variety of components so you can quickly build web applications. We throw in the kitchen sink too. The component dev kit, or CDK, offers reusable primitives so you won't have to start from scratch when building your own components. Let's talk about the guardrails we put into components and primitives. Thanks to Emma, we know that Ally stands for We've also made improvements under the hood that make it easier for you to build accessible applications. Components are vetted for compatibility with screen readers. Angular material supports 6 screen readers and covers 94% of users. But inclusiveness doesn't just mean having a high percentage. We cover screen readers on every major operating system. We have Chrome OS with Chromebox, Mac OS VoiceOver, Windows, NVDA JAWS, iOS VoiceOver, and Android TalkBack. End users will have a delightful experience on any device. Google's rigorous accessibility standards have too many criteria to share them all. But let's talk through a few. Sometimes it's easier to read a page when zoomed in. Accessibility requires supporting zooming in to 200% or maybe even 300%. Our components scale well and can handle zoom no problem. We also support keyboard users that don't have a mouse available. Every component can be easily used with a keyboard. By the way, enable strong focus so it's more obvious which browser element the user is interacting with. With strong focus styles enabled, focus states will be clear and have sufficient color contrast. Adequate color contrast makes web pages easier to read, especially for users who are blind or with low vision. Color contrast, focus, and scaling are a few of the things we test. We've landed many bug fixes. If you follow Emma on Twitter, you may have seen a few of these fixes. This is actually my job, to fix bugs, and we put in a lot of detail work to have confidence that we meet Google's rigorous standards. Well, there's one component that has seen a lot of attention lately. Maybe you can guess it. It's the date picker. Let's go. I use the date picker to book my flight here to Salt Lake City from San Francisco. And we could all agree that date pickers are notoriously difficult. It has multiple facets of complexity between multiple visual states, dialogue interaction, not to mention the complexity of representing dates. There's time zones. On Tuesday, I had a moment here where I got confused about the time zone change from San Francisco to Salt Lake City. But the date picker is agnostic to the representation of dates, and you can BYO any date library you like. And the date picker needs to work with all of them. And the date picker code is flexible enough to work in any locale. To top it off, the date picker is themable and provides an accessible experience in any which way it is customized. Let's talk about a few of my favorite bug fixes. We've fixed many accessibility bugs, and there's too many for me to go over all in detail. Let's talk through a few. The first bug is related to how I keep forgetting what day it is. This is cool. This is my favorite bug fix. Sometimes I forget what day it is, and it would be great if there was a way to remind me. Does anyone know a way to remind me of the date?
The
No?
screen?
Well, thank you, Emma. If you're a sighted member of the audience, you may know that today is Friday, September 2nd, because it says so on the slide behind me. For people without sight, then this isn't very helpful. The calendar puts a ring around the current date, but since it only communicates using visuals, it's only helpful for sighted users. For users without sight, there was no communication about which day is today. In order to have an equitable experience for all users, we communicate pertinent information with at least 2 senses. We implemented ARIA current to communicate to screen readers which date cell is the current day. Screen readers announce the cell as today or current date. We've fixed a few more bugs to create an equitable experience for screen reader users. We'll look at a simple flow. Open the calendar and select the day after tomorrow. But we'll do it using a screen reader. We've corrected the focus trapping to correctly implement ARIA dialogue interaction pattern. Each cell on the calendar communicates a few things, like it's interactive, you can click on it, selected, not selected, oh, current date, because I forget. We went into detail with ARIA specification and our supported screen readers to make sure the right information is communicated. And we did all that so you don't have to. This was tricky to get right, and if you catch me after the talk, I can go into more detail about the weird screen reader quirks we ran into. For the most part, you should get these fixes for free after updating, and be sure to read the documentation to avoid pitfalls. We frequently refine our accessibility documentation so you can customize the date picker while having an accessible experience for your users. But we're not done yet. At the time of writing, Carl landed a user experience improvement for the date picker, and as Chief Date Picker Officer, I also have a few improvements coming out in V15. Frequently update to get our fixes, and read the accessibility section of the docs, too. Emma loves to ng-update. In her own words, something solved all her problems, and all it took was an ng-update.
Thank you, Zach. And since Zach is putting quotes into my mouth that I definitely never said, but I agree with, I'm going to have everybody do that here. So really, the thesis of all of this is the Angular team is thinking about accessibility a lot, and you shouldn't have to think about a lot of the things that we just mentioned, right? Like, if you use the date picker out of the box, you get that ARIA current. You still have to test for accessibility, and we're absolutely not saying frameworks cannot guarantee accessibility, but we can think about a lot of this stuff and provide built-in solutions to help you get to, again, the end of that bowling lane. So to put some words in your mouth, the way to do this is to ng.
Update.
Not ng, you're going to update. So if I say ng, you're going to say update. ng.
Update.
ng.
Update.
ng.
Update.
ng.
Update.
Yes. And if you need to do additional things to maybe control more granular support, you're going to ng-add Angular CDK ally. ng-add
Angular CDK ally.
ng-add
Angular CDK ally.
All right, so now that I've put some words in your mouth, I'm going to put some words in some developers' mouths. So let's look at a large-scale app using Angular doing exactly that. So Air France is the flag-carrying airline of France, but I think of it as the way that Zach and I are going to book a flight tomorrow to Paris to celebrate giving the best conference talk ever and eat a very delicious baguette. And if I actually zoom into that website underneath my baguette plane, I can see that they use Angular. And even better yet, they use Angular Material. And even better yet, that is the Angular Material date picker. And even better yet, they ng.
Update.
Yeah, so if we take a look at that date picker, we can see that I can select my flight dates in a date range. And with a screen reader, I have that accurate and correct ARIA current. I have focus dates. I can actually get to Paris on my flight because I can book my flight using a screen reader because of all of the built-in stuff that the Angular's team is doing to test, as well as all of the great work that Air France is doing to test their specific user flow. But a lot of the errors they're seeing are specific to their user flow, and the actual ARIA stuff we are trying to handle where we can and where the Angular framework identifies that we can fill in gaps and provide guardrails. And a lot of that comes from the fact that the Angular team is prioritizing first-party accessibility. And we ng.
Update.
OK. You have one action item after this. So our goal here is to support you in building for everyone. And hopefully you've gotten the sense that the Angular team cares deeply and is committed to first-party accessibility. From here, you have a few action items. Go check out our built-in solutions. I talked about a ton today. If one of them resonated, definitely go check it out. If you have questions about it, go read our accessibility docs. We've done a ton of work in updating them. The Angular Material accessibility sections have gotten a ton of updating. And if the built-in solutions don't do enough for you, check out the Angular CDK Ally package and see if the cool tools there can help solve some of your problems. And if you have questions, tweet me, and I'm going to forward all of them to Zach, who doesn't have a Twitter. And come talk to us after the talk. And of course, ng.
Update!
Thank you so much, and come talk accessibility to us. Our slides are there. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.